Who doesn't love getting their mind fucked? I know I do, you probably do, the person sitting next to you probably does, even the person outside your window probably does. And today I'll be discussing a movie I recently watched called A Scanner Darkly. It was based on a book by Philip K. Dick. And before you watch this video, I want you to open a new tab and search Scanner Darkly bicycle scene and just watch that. Don't watch anything else, just watch that and then come back and then watch the rest of this video. And no, dear viewer, your eyes do not deceive you. Keanu Reeves is in fact a walking cartoon. See, interestingly, this movie is entirely rotoscoped. If you don't know what rotoscoping is, then stop watching my channel right now because you don't deserve to be here. But in all seriousness, it's basically a technique where you draw over a real-life frame. You can see this technique in things like Lord of the Rings and Heavy Metal, which I've covered a while back. I'm willing to bet most of you know this iconic piece of media, but what you probably don't know is that this was actually rotoscoped. Anyway, back to A Scanner Darkly. It actually integrates the rotoscoping into the story of the movie in a pretty interesting way. These you see are scramble suits. You can probably tell why they're called that. Now, as still images, they look pretty weird, but in motion, they're actually very visually interesting and almost kind of headachy to look at, where basically they're suits that shift in and out of different holograms of different people. This is meant to protect the wearer's identity. They also distort the wearer's voice as well, and they're worn primarily by members of the police force called imposters. The main conflict of Scanner Darkly is about a drug called Substance D, which literally it's a red pill with a black skull on it. How do you look more evil than that? But basically the drug is poisoning people and killing them. It's actually, I think it's legal, whereas stuff like weed and cocaine are still illegal, which is, weird and messed up, but that's the entire point. Then we meet our protagonist, Bruce. Okay, this is when things start to get a little confusing. Keanu Reeves is balancing two identities, an imposter named Frank and a drug addict named Bob Arctor. Get it? Bob Arctor. Bad actor. In one scene, Bob and his drug addict friends are in the middle of a blunt rotation when they start talking about some international criminal, someone who goes around impersonating people and even successfully impersonated an imposter. Keanu Reeves then says, "What if he posed as a narc?" and then starts laughing uncomfortably. And judging by the fact that we never hear about this strange criminal ever again, and the fact that at the end of the movie it's revealed that his real name is Bruce, not Frank or Bob, I think this is meant to imply that Keanu Reeves was the impersonating criminal all along. We even get a bit of backstory where apparently he used to have a family but was unsatisfied with life and had become a shell of his former self. Eventually he had become so fed up he just snapped, and I'm guessing it was some point after that he started going around impersonating people. If you're lost already, then buckle up because this is going to get even crazier. So as Arctor, he infiltrates this crack den and he meets up with Robert Downey Jr. and Woody Harrelson, and he's trying to figure out. So Robert Downey Jr. is making the Substance D, I think he's making. So he's in contact with the supplier for the chemical, and Arctor's trying to find out where it's coming from. But at the same time, the police department suspect that he is the real mastermind ringleader of the whole thing, and so they send him as Frank to investigate the house that he's already in undercover at. So he puts a bunch of security cameras in the house, and then as Frank, he needs to watch back the footage and find evidence of stuff and find dirt on Arctor, even though he is Arctor. And if that still isn't enough for you, early on in the investigation he becomes addicted to the Substance D, and so over time, his perception of reality starts to get more and more warped the longer the movie goes on. There's an unsettling scene where he's talking to two doctors and then he turns around, and I'm not going to spoil what happens next, but it's a very subtle kind of hint that he's slowly losing his mind, and it's pretty creepy. Overall, I'd have to say I have two big complaints, or maybe not two, I guess three big complaints with Scanner Darkly. The first one being the animation. So, the rotoscoping, yeah, it's really good, and it does look kind of almost like a cross between live action and cartoon. I'm not going to say that the rotoscoping is bad, because, it is pretty good, and this movie must have been, a nightmare to just completely draw over every frame, but I feel like they could have done more with it. There's a lot of very, live action scenes where it's characters sitting around a room talking to each other and Robert Downey Jr. whispering so quietly, you got to turn the volume up so freaking high. Aside from the scramble suits and a few hallucinations here and there, they don't really do a whole lot with the animation. There's one really great scene where the guy, Freck, I think was his name, he's trying to off himself, but it fails, and he just gets put in like sleep paralysis. And at the start of the scene, he like turns on the radio, and the radio's like talking through about the news. But then as the scene goes on, the radio starts like describing what's happening to him and how he like attempted to overdose, but then it didn't work, and he was like hallucinating an alien reading to him his sins. And like, I like that. That scene was directed very well, and I wanted more scenes like that in it, but there unfortunately weren't a whole lot. My other issue with it, I don't know why I said I had three issues. It's two. I don't know. I had it in my head that like not enough drug tripping and not enough use of the animation. Those are just like the same thing. But yeah, my other issue is that it's pretty confusing, and I don't just mean with all the drugs and hallucinating. I mean like it's just in general really confusing. The whole way the police force works is a little strange because like the fact that he was assigned to like investigate himself and they didn't like catch on to that is a little weird. I guess that's the point, is that he's impersonating an imposter, which that in of itself is already confusing. But like still, how did they not, they don't have any like way to tell who's who. And like I don't know. I don't know if this criticism really makes any sense. I'm glad that they didn't spell things out, but I still feel like there could have been more hints as to the way the world worked. There's one scene where Keanu Reeves breaks down and then pretty much like explains the entire theme of the film, even like the definition of the term scanner darkly in this context. And normally I wouldn't really like that. I'm not saying I do like it here, but I am going to cite it a lot, so I can't really complain. Scanner darkly pretty much refers to when something's inner true self is hidden by its outside shell, its lie. Whenever he watches the security camera footage, he's trying to find evidence that he's a criminal, but he, in that footage, knows deep down that he's not the one that they should be after. Or the fact that he's impersonating people, or even the imposters just in general, are like wearing these disguises all the time. Things are not always as they seem. Or another thing with drug addiction, how you take it and your brain starts to fry and you hallucinate. Things aren't always as they seem. There's a lot of themes of like truth and lie, and like cameras don't actually see the truth, they just see the facade we put on. And it's pretty interesting. Um, there are two plot twists at the end of the movie. I'm not gonna spoil what either of them are, but they both do heavily tie into a whole theme of like things being a lie and things not always being as they seem. So that's pretty, yeah. So overall, it's a pretty trippy movie. Whether or not it like makes sense or you like it, I guess, is up for your interpretation. It's best viewed completely blind, which you probably can't do now that I've told you everything, but still, um, some of my interpretations or ideas from it might not be super accurate because it's very confusing. This is just what I think. None of this is definitive proof. Like, honestly, this might be one of my favorite types of movies. If I were to make a movie at some point in my life, if I could only make one, I'd want it to be something kind of like this, that's unique and weird and trippy. And there are also like a handful of pretty funny moments here and there, which I also really appreciate. So, towards the end of researching in this video, I didn't have any place to say it before, but I found out that Philip K. Dick is actually the guy that wrote the books that Total Recall and Blade Runner were based on. Which I say the books that they were based on and not them, because the books actually have different titles. The movies are all like Total Recall, Blade Runner, but the books are like Do Robots Dream of Electric Sheep, or We Will Remember You For You Hold Still, or something like that. I don't know, but the titles are like weird for some reason. I actually do have a Total Recall review on this channel, so you can check that out also. I won't link it though because I hate you specifically. Um, and as for Blade Runner, admittedly, I don't love it that much. 2049 is good though. I like that one. That one's cool. And that concludes my Scanner Darkly review. Have you seen Scanner Darkly? What did you think of it? Leave that in the comments below, or if you want, you can leave a suggestion for anything else you want me to cover. I will look at it, but I will look at it, and until then, this has been Bradwurst, signing off. I don't need it. I don't need it. I need it!